Yep. Well, I would say the first thing we got to do is we do need to reach out to them. We need to even get the conversation going, right? So we got to prospect or whatever you want to call it. And I think most prospecting today is pretty shitty. I mean, like I call it sales spam.
Yeah.
Right? Hey, can you tell me the person at company XYZ responsible for purchasing or whatever other technique you're using?
Hello Sales Nation and welcome to the Salesman Podcast Live in partnership with HubSpot Sales and here at the Revenue Summit in San Francisco. On today's episode we have John Miller, CEO of Engagio.com, and he is sharing how he, very personally, would go about closing one of those huge deals that we all have available to us in our industry or in our vertical. You can find out more about John over at salesmanpodcast.com in the show notes. And with all that said, let's jump into today's show. Hi John, and welcome to the Salesman Podcast.
Thanks for having me.
I'm glad to have you on, mate. I want to take a slight twist on the angle that we've talked about in the past of the account-based selling, the account-based marketing, and I want to get your actual insights and what you would do as CEO, sales leader, on if you wanted to land a huge account. So we're here at the Revenue Summit. I'll put you into the perspective and the pitch of if someone came up to you now, there's a crazy deal on the table, and you want to take this yourself, you want to be in control of it. I want to find out, and as we go through the conversation, of where you'd start, the research that you'd do, the outreach you'd do, who you'd want to be in front of, and we'll come to the conclusion at the end of where we'd go with all that. Yep. So let's get us started, John. What would be, again, someone walks up to you here, you know they've got a crazy budget, they're a great fit, so there's not really any qualification that needs to happen, but what would be your first step in the account-based marketing, account-based selling process when you meet with this individual here at the Revenue Summit?
Yep. Well, I would say the first thing we got to do is we do need to reach out to them. We need to even get the conversation going, right? So we got to prospect or whatever you want to call it. And I think most prospecting today is pretty shitty. I mean, like I call it sales spam.
Yeah.
Right. Hey, can you tell me the person at company XYZ responsible for purchasing or whatever other technique you're using? And that's not going to work, especially for this big account, right? It's so easy for somebody to take that sales spam message, hit the spam button, right? And now I lost my ability to reach that person ever. So it's too risky.
Yeah.
Right? Now, on the flip side, there's some research from the ITSMA, IT Services and Marketing Association. These are the guys that actually invented the term account-based marketing. And they found that 75% of executives will respond to an unsolicited outreach if it contains ideas that are relevant for advancing their business. Right? Where relevant for their business means that it is specific to their industry, perhaps customized to their unique company, and then actually has some relevant business ideas. So to me, that sounds a lot like the Challenger sale.
Yeah.
Right? What do the best salespeople do? They teach, and then they tailor what they're teaching to the specific company. So, I want to land this big whale you just talked about.
Yep.
I don't want to send them sales spam. I want to actually have a Challenger sales style conversation with them. And to do that, I've got to start with research, right? Which means, I think, understanding the account and the industry. So there's the generic stuff you're going to do, like read the 10K. What are the key business priorities that they're facing? What's going on in their who are their closest comparable competitors? What's happening in those companies? Mm-hmm. Maybe I work with some of those companies.
I think you just pulled on something here that is super practical for the audience and super relevant. And I don't think I've ever really done this specifically of look at the competitors and look at trigger events that are going on as in those accounts
people
as well.
People are super interested in their competition.
Yeah, of course.
That's like the most important things that people want to know about. So you're going to do some generic company level stuff, and I'm assuming this is an industry you sold to, so maybe you have a good understanding of the industry trends and the key pains in the industry. Now, again, this is all your assumption is this is a big whale, big, huge account, which means there's probably also more than one buying center going on in this company. And so I probably have to do some buying center mapping too.
So this is super important. How would you personally go about finding out who the decision makers are, who the influencers are, who the purchasers are? Is there a step-by-step process to do that? Because I think a lot of Sales Nation, I've done it myself when I was in medical device sales. I thought I'd speak to the right person, and then I'd speak to them and be passed on, especially in the NHS in the UK, where nobody knows what's going on half the time anyway at the management level. So how would you personally go about that from a structured process?
Well, first of all, I mean, there's data you can buy, and where I can, obviously, that's a useful thing. Whether that's knowing that Disney has 7 subdivisions to them, because Dun & Bradstreet can tell me that, or within then each division, tools like Discover.org that have done some mapping of groups and personas and all that.
Okay.
So if I can start with any data, I would. Then, though, that's where you find somebody, engage them in a challenge or sale conversation, give some value, teach, and in exchange, you're not asking for the deal, you're asking for information. And you just start your mapping. By the way, there's also third parties that can do this for you, whether it's by appointment only or other companies that will do some of this buyer center mapping. I think once you get that, then sometimes it's worth doing then also, I think, white space mapping. So for that buying center, maybe your competitor is installed there. And maybe you're installed in this buying center, and this third buying center is greenfield, open territory. You want to know that, right? Because again, that set of understanding. Ultimately, for these big whale accounts, what we're doing is we're treating each account as a market of one. And what's meant by that is, let's say you're trying to enter Germany. New business, you're trying to go into this new market. What you can do, you're going to research the hell out of Germany, understand where the opportunities are, and once you've understood that market, you're going to create programs and campaigns and emails in German, right? That actually speak to them. So basically, we're talking about doing the same thing for this big account.
So is another way of looking at this, you're treating it as a market as opposed to a series of individuals that will allow you to achieve your goal. Of when you're in here, obviously San Francisco, companies are looking for product market fit. They're not necessarily looking for product this individual fit. Is that another way of looking at it, perhaps?
It's an interesting way to think about it. Yeah, I mean, again, let's say you're trying to sell to Toyota. Their annual revenue is bigger than the GDP of some countries.
Yeah.
Right? And so the main point I'm making is, so spend as much time thinking about making sure you know how to talk to Toyota as you would think about entering into a new market. Now, here's the thing. This sounds like a lot of work.
Sounds like a lot of work.
And it should sound like a lot of work because it is. And the juice has to be worth the squeeze.
Sure.
Which is a line I love. Meaning, if you're going to sell a 7 or 8 figure deal, then by all means do all this.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I mean, that was the premise of your question.
Yep.
Right? I think the thing that kind of held account-based everything back for the last 10 years is people thought that's all that it meant, is going after the big deals.
Yeah.
And so a lot of people looked at it and said, well, I don't sell 7-figure deals, so that's not for me. That's too hard or too complicated. So part of the real trick, I think, is how do you take this whole thing I just talked about, which works really well, but it's really hard, and basically right-size it and make it more scalable so you can do it for hundreds or even thousands of accounts.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think that's sort of where the forefront of account-based everything is today.
And how? So you've teed this up, I feel like you're teasing us here a little bit with that last statement, John. But how do you then? And I don't want to talk about the organizational standpoint. I want to keep it as specific as I can for B2B sales, leadership, and B2B marketing as well, rather than the CEO level. But how do we implement this and make it scale somewhat? How do we go about doing that?
Yep. Well, I think there's 2 things well, I'll give you 3 things, actually. So I think the first thing is you've got to get the entire company to align on who are the target accounts, which sounds really, really obvious, but I've seen it not happen.
Yep.
I've seen marketing decide, hey, we're going to go do account-based marketing, and they go do some maybe really cool campaigns, and get interest from a bunch of accounts that they then give to sales, and sales isn't interested because that's not the account sales wanted. Or the worst case scenario is imagine you got sales working on these set of accounts and marketing working on these accounts, and they don't overlap.
Yeah.
So step one, pretty obvious, is just get everybody to agree on the accounts. I think the second step, which is a little more subtle and related to the question, is it's not. I don't think we're talking about. We're not talking about one size fits all. What we started talking about was treating each account as a market of one. So very high research, very high personalization.
Yep.
And that might be appropriate for a handful of accounts, like literally count them on one hand, in terms of the number of accounts that you might go after. But now let's say there's a second layer, which let's call medium research and medium personalization.
Yep.
Maybe instead of creating...
And does this need to be defined? Do we need to have a structure of whether we have personas of number of employees versus revenue is X, Y, Z? Larger than that, we should spend more time on them. Do we need to go that far?
I wouldn't do it. I would make them named accounts and not rules by size.
Okay.
Because for your business, it might be right to have 3 high research, high personalization, and then you might have another company that's just as big that you put into the second tier because you don't only have resources to do 3.
Sure.
at the high tier. So what I'm saying with the medium research and medium personalization is instead of something completely bespoke, maybe you take some existing industry-specific content, put the client's logo on the cover, and then use your research to slightly customize the first and last paragraph. So now they get something that looks like it's written and speaking pretty much to them, but that's obviously just a more scalable process.
Yeah. And is that enough? Because I've had a couple of conversations today with other individuals that are, pitching the opposite of that we should be going all in on personalization. What I don't know, and you might be able to tell me, and the answer is, the answer might be, we don't know. But is there a line of customization where people accept it? Maybe they don't get super excited about it, but it's acceptable. And how do we find that line?
More personalization is always better.
Yeah.
Right. And so I don't want to convey anything but that.
Of course.
But we can't take every single account and research them to the nth degree and treat them in a completely bespoke manner.
Yeah.
Right. It just doesn't scale. And so that's why it is a question of prioritization. And basically you have these styles. You have high research, high personalization, medium research, medium personalization, and you can figure out the third one, low research, low personalization. And how many accounts you have, and just make sure your company's aligned. Which accounts are going to get high, which accounts are going to get medium, which accounts will get low.
Yeah. And
it's the right answer is going to be what your organization can actually do.
Okay.
So it's overly simplistic when you talk about it, but yeah, give as much personalization as you can, given the reality of the resources of your organization.
Yeah, well, it's practical.
Yeah. But I'll say one more thing.
Sure.
There's a difference, I think, between personalization and then faking being human. I guess
yes.
is where I'm going with it.
Yes,
100%. Like in animation, there's this thing called the uncanny valley.
Yeah.
Like the Polar Express movie where it's not quite human and so it looks weird.
I watched an NVIDIA demo recently and they were right on the verge of real-time rendering of, it's not quite real, but if you squinted, it could be a real person.
So it's a big challenge in animation, and it really freaks people out. I think the same thing is true in personalization. If your personalization is trying to look like a human did this, it's really, really easy to get it not quite right, and therefore do very badly.
Yeah. And why is that? What's the psychology behind that? Is it because we feel like we're being misled? We feel like someone's trying to trick us that they are personalizing things?
I mean, we've all gotten stuff that's just like badly personalized. I got one the other day. So my company, Engage's headquarters, we're subleasing our space from another company called Collective Health, right? So our IP address maps to something that says Collective Health.
Yeah.
And a lot of companies use IP-based targeting in their personalization.
Yeah.
And they think they're all cool, right? But like I go to their website and they say, hello, Collective Health, right? And like you've instantly turned me off. Right? You're trying to be more relevant, but your data's not right. You're not, and like a human, by the way, trying to sell me would have figured that out.
Yeah.
But you're trying to automate it without the right data. You just end up getting murgled, kind of along the way.
Yeah, makes total sense. I want to go back to and wrap up with one thing that you mentioned earlier on. Because as I said, if we go back to the step-by-step process of you personally, of John crushing this huge deal, this whale, how do you know? And again, I don't want you to tell us about the tools or anything like that. I want you to tell us real practically, if you're sat in front of your laptop, how you go about this. How do you know what you can, to use your words, teach? How do you know how you can add insights? What would be your step-by-step process of going, so this individual, I want to engage with them. They are the right individual. It's the right time. It's the right place. Everything's aligned. They're pre-qualified. How would you go about putting that research together to give them an insight that continues the conversation?
Sure. Well, in some ways, this is where it's easier to be a CEO. Because in many cases, that's kind of what I'm doing all the time.
Yep.
I think to answer the question a little more generally, if you're not necessarily a CEO.
No, give us your CEO perspective. Because
as a CEO, I'm looking at a lot of companies. I tend to think about kind of a holistic set of things. It's relatively easier for me to go into some company and talk about industry trends, right? And also because I'm me and I have the background that I have, I'm walking with a lot of inherent credibility.
Because the reason I ask this is, I think, and tell me if I'm right or wrong here, I think it's a really underutilized resource. Clearly you're crazy busy, but for sales reps to get senior management involved in conversations, I don't think that happens fast enough. And I know for me in medical device sales, when I'd bring in some of the senior like product specialists or whoever they were that knew the urologists that I was selling to, because they've been training urologists since the urologists were trainees. Obviously, they're spread all over the country, the account people that I'm mentioning. But me pestering them to come along to a conference, there's surgeons there that I'm selling to, that was such a value add for them that it was worth me pestering internally to make it happen.
Yeah.
Is that something that should be done more?
Yeah, well, 100%. So, I mean, fundamentally, we're talking about account-based sales. Too many people think about that just in the context of the target account.
Yeah.
Right? So what is the opposite of account-based sales? Opposite of account-based sales is just you talking to just one person.
Yeah.
Right? So you can layer on, it's not just you talking to one person, but you talking to the fact there's multiple people at that account. Right? So now you're having a one-to-many conversation, which any good salesperson should be doing because any one person can say no.
Yep.
And you got decision makers and influencers and gatekeepers and all this kind of stuff. Now, when people talk about account-based sales, that's usually what they mean. You're talking to multiple people. But don't forget, you have an account on your side. You have a whole team of people in your organization. Yeah. It's not just you. You've got your sales development team. You've got your marketing team. And break marketing, you got your demand gen and your product marketing. You've got your subject matter experts. You've got your executives. So now, really account-based selling is I got my team, I've got your team. Who does what when? And it's why ultimately I end up calling it a play, because I keep thinking of American football coach with, on a chalkboard, X's and O's. You're going to go here, you're going to block that person, you're going to open up a hole here, and it's about lining my team to your team. That's account-based selling. So yeah, 100%. I think orchestrating a good play is using any resource from your company, available to you to make it happen.
So final question on this, then we'll wrap up, John. But you've intrigued me here because that's an analogy I've not heard before, and it clarifies everything that we're talking about. It makes total sense. When we are going after a big whale account, should we sit down and it doesn't have to be a paper written exercise, but should we put down a play-by-play of what we want to do in first period, second period, third period, and I guess we can assign responsibilities and other things of that nature to make sure that everything gets done. But is that an exercise that should be done at the beginning of it, as opposed to I think a lot of the times when I've done account-based selling, like inadvertently,
Yeah.
by selling to a hospital and a trust and bringing people in and all this good stuff, I've let it happen organically.
Yeah. So let's extend our football analogy here. I think the first thing is that there should be a coach,
Okay.
right? And the coach is the person who writes the plays for your company. And usually that's going to be sales management, maybe some collaboration with marketing, depending on the kind of company. And then I think that the account executive, the salesperson, he or she is the quarterback.
Okay.
So his or her job is to call the play based on the conditions on the field. They know the playbook. So I know I can call this play or this play or this play, which is the right play to call right now based on what I see. And I think if you can make that work, then now you know your organization's ready to respond to the plays you need to run.
Yeah.
I think the other thing you can do is this is where you get into like vendor ease or whatever. But there is a buyer journey. And as buyers go through each stage of their journey, the appropriate plays to run are going to be different. So part of that coach writing the playbook should be thinking about the right play for each stage of the journey.
That makes total sense. That, genuinely, I'll stroke your ego here, that was the most succinct and wrapped up way of describing that it might even be worth myself writing a blog post and following up on it, because, and I don't know about yourself, but I have to visualize stuff for it to make sense. And point it in that perspective, especially with the sales rep, perhaps they don't have total authority over the whole situation, depending on who the leadership is going to be within that takes the account, especially when we're talking these big accounts. But them having the experience, the business acumen, and the kind of like past plays to go off, and being the ringleader of it all makes total sense. So appreciate that, John. And with that, mate, I've got one final question, something to ask everyone that comes on the show.
Sure.
And that is, if you could go back in time and speak to your younger self, what would be the one piece of advice you'd give him to help him become better at selling?
I think I'd give him some advice that I actually eventually got in my career, which is a flavor of only the paranoid survive. You know, which is effectively the best salespeople are the most paranoid. Because if you're paranoid, then you're always assuming that your competition is calling in higher or has a better product, you know, or is got a better price, or who knows, but you're thinking about every possible thing that can go wrong that would make you lose this deal. And that paranoia is what's going to drive you to do all the things to protect yourself so that you don't lose the deal.
So I'm going to wrap up with this. How important is it for you to, so if you're investing, you might, I know nothing about this, so I'm going to use really poor examples, but if you might have money in the stock market, and if the stock market goes bad, perhaps property booms, so you buy into that as well, so you're offsetting things. How important is it for salespeople to do the same, of have, you know, the big account that they're going after, but they've got these sure things on the side that they're keeping on touch of? Because I personally like to take risk inherently. My genes are risk-taking genes.
Sure.
And yours are as well, I'm sure. Tell me if I'm wrong, but you know, the founder, the startup growth, kind of rapid growth. So there must be some tolerance of risk in there as well. How important is it for salespeople to understand this, that salespeople are potentially risk takers, and to offset some of the risk by really thinking about how they can go about doing that?
Well, with more risk comes more reward.
Yeah.
So, I mean, almost everybody has, you know, the place on the efficient frontier where they're comfortable, you know, balancing risk and reward. You know, to use your stock market analogy, the thing you got to watch out for is there's systematic risk that you can't diversify away.
Yep.
So you want more reward, you take on more risk.
Yeah.
And then there's non-systematic risk that you can diversify away. You know, and so, you know, to me, that's, for example, as you manage your pipeline, thinking about what are the close dates. You know, and if you know, don't try not to structure your pipeline so every single major deal closes on December 31st. Right?
Makes total sense. That's so practical. It's fantastic.
Reduces your risk, and it'll make your boss happier.
I've been there with the sales manager. Last sales job I had, sales manager was crazy angry at me for a whole 12 months. And then I came in at the end with this $2 million like whole hospital theatre conversion. It was one of those it was probably unnecessary stress that I didn't need to put on myself, of just communicating all this stuff further. So I appreciate that, John. And John, for everyone who's tuned in, for everyone super excited to learn more about account-based selling, account-based marketing, account-based everything, tell us where we can find out more about you.
Sure. Engageo.com. I will give one quick shout out. We recently published the Engageo playbook, which is 83 pages long, and it talks about all the plays that we run as part of our sales, marketing, and our customer success organization. And you can grab a copy of that on the site.
Amazing stuff. Well, we'll link to that over in the show notes over at salesmanpodcast.com. We'll link to Engageo as well. And with that, mate, I want to thank you for your time. I want to thank you for joining us on the Salesman Podcast.
It's fun being here.